Hey everyone, and welcome back to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is absolutely one of the most important topics you're going to encounter in your intermediate first-year political science syllabus, and that is law. Now, whether you realize it or not, the principles we're about to unpack today govern literally almost every single aspect of your daily life. I mean, think about it for a second. What actually keeps society from just falling into total chaos? Why do we all agree to stop at red lights? Why do we honor contracts when we buy or sell something? You see, law isn't just some dry textbook concept made up of dusty old books. It's actually the invisible operating system of human society. It is the very framework that allows billions of us to coexist, trade, build, and actually thrive together. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the roadmap we're going to follow today. We'll start with what is law, then look at ancient sources of law, move into the courts and equity, then modern democratic lawmaking, and finally wrap up with the purpose of law. All right, starting right off with Section 1, what is law? The basics. The very word law actually comes from the Latin word legis, which simply translates to a rule or regulation. When you strip away all the massive complexity, the fancy courtrooms and the confusing legal jargon, at its absolute core, law is just a set of rules. It's a system designed entirely to regulate how people behave in a society, basically so that everyone knows exactly what to expect from one another. But here's the catch. A rule is kinda just a suggestion unless there's actual power backing it up. And that brings us to this really famous quote by the political thinker John Austin. He said, "Law is the command of the sovereign." In plain English, anybody can write down a list of rules, but for them to actually count as law, they absolutely must be made and enforced by a competent sovereign authority. Without the power of the state behind it, well, a rule is really just a suggestion. It's like a referee out on the field without a whistle. Moving right along to Section 2, Ancient Sources of Law, focusing on customs and religion. Now, this illustrates a really fascinating contrast. If you look at the past, the foundations were ancient customs and religion. But today, we rely on these highly structured modern frameworks, like constitutions and legislation. Today's laws are drafted in formal government sessions, for sure, but historically, the foundation of human law was built much, much more organically. So let's look a little closer at those ancient sources. Early laws were definitely not written in boardrooms. They evolved directly from customs, which are just practices and traditions followed by people for a really long time. When a custom becomes so deeply ingrained in a society that the state finally steps in and says, okay, we recognize and accept this, it officially transforms into law. And right alongside customs, we have religion. In ancient societies, religious principles played a massive role in dictating the rules of social conduct. In fact, many of those historical religious practices heavily influenced the development of the formal laws we still use today. Next up is Section 3, the courts and equity, and how judicial decisions shape things. As societies grew and got more complex, courts, especially higher courts, were forced to make rulings on entirely new or completely unique cases. And their decisions became an incredibly important source of law moving forward. We call these judicial decisions precedents. By establishing a precedent, the court is essentially putting a stake in the ground and saying, all right, this is how we solve this problem today, and so this is exactly how similar problems are going to be solved in the future. It's a really brilliant way of actively building the law piece by piece, case by case. Now, what's really interesting about this is that even with all the customs, rules, and precedents in the world, sometimes a situation pops up where the existing laws just do not provide a fair or adequate solution. When there's a gap in the written rules, courts turn to equity. Equity simply means fairness and justice. It essentially allows judges to step in and apply basic human fairness to solve a problem when the rigid written letters of the law just fall short. Fast forward to today with Section 4, Modern Democratic Lawmaking and Democratic States. Today, we rely heavily on legislation, and legislation refers directly to the laws that are created by the legislature, which are the elected bodies representing us, the people. In modern democratic states, this is the absolute engine of our operating system. Legislation is considered the single most important source of law we have today, mainly because it's actively and intentionally designed to address the current, real-time needs of society. But wait, even the legislature has limits, right? And those limits are defined by the Constitution. The Constitution is the fundamental law of the country. It is the ultimate rulebook. Honestly, you can think of it as the law that governs the lawmakers themselves. Every single piece of legislation, every precedent we talked about, and every recognized custom must conform entirely to the provisions laid out in the Constitution. If a law contradicts the Constitution, it simply cannot stand. Which brings us to our final piece, Section 5, the purpose of law and the goals of society. So, what does this all mean? The entire purpose of this massive, complex system really comes down to maintaining four key things: peace, order, justice, and discipline in society. Without these four goals being actively upheld by the law, our societal operating system just crashes. Law is what prevents anarchy. It ensures fairness, and it creates a disciplined environment where human beings can actually trust one another and cooperate safely. As you continue crushing your intermediate first-year studies, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. If the Constitution is the fundamental law of the land today, and legislation is constantly evolving to meet our modern needs, how do you think future generations will rewrite the rules of society to handle the unpredictable challenges of tomorrow? Will our current precedents actually hold up? It's a fascinating question. This foundational explainer on the definition and sources of law has been proudly presented by MEGHA Education. Keep questioning the rules around you, keep studying hard, and I will see you in the next explainer.